Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first of our career development webinars about the PhD. This webinar is presented by the National Research Mentoring Network in partnership with the Association of American Medical Colleges. My name is Victoria Friedman, and I'm coming to you from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. And we're going to talk a little today about graduate school and whether this is the right choice for you. So a good way to start is by asking yourself, are you fascinated by human biology and disease? Are you curious about how and why things work the way they do? Are you creative in the way that you think and do things? Do you love science and you have a real aptitude for difficult work? Do you have the persistence to see a project through from small beginnings to great discoveries? These are all the attributes of a scientist. And maybe you are already starting to think like a scientist. Biomedical scientists use the power of research to understand and cure human disease. But what is biomedical research exactly? We hear about it all the time, but we know that it can describe many things. It is about finding out how cells and organisms work in health and in disease. It is mostly done in the lab, but not always. There are many scientists who study systems, populations, and clinical studies, and these are all done outside of a lab. It is hard work, but the real secret is that it is a lot of fun. So let's say this is sounding intriguing to you. Who can do medical research? Well, it turns out that anyone with a STEM education has the appropriate background to begin exploring biomedical research as a career. And some examples of STEM backgrounds are here on this slide, and you may find your current favorite listed here. So how can you find out more about research? Well, the most important thing is to explore science in all its aspects and find out if you like doing it. And in order to do that, you might consider pursuing a summer undergraduate research program, identifying an experience that will allow you to work in a lab full-time and understand what it's like to be part of the research activities. We're going to talk a little bit more about how you can actually identify these opportunities, both in your institution and outside of your institution. You also want to look for research opportunities as an undergraduate, and you want to meet people who are already involved in research. This includes students, postdocs, leaders of laboratories. You want to speak to them about their experiences, what they like doing, and how they got to do what they're doing now. So how can you get more and more involved in research as a future career? What you really need to consider is getting a PhD. And this PhD can be in any of the areas of science. So all of these areas of science are interrelated, from the physical sciences to the biological sciences to the quantitative sciences, and all of these have as their ultimate goal improving human health. So you may be asking, why should I get a PhD? Well, some of the reasons are enumerated here. You want to become an expert in a particular field of science. You want to have the opportunity to learn from other students and to sample the ideas of faculty. You want to get to know the prevailing wisdom in a field. What do people think is really going on now? You want to take courses that are interesting and exciting, and you want to gain the technical skills and learn actually how to do creative and thoughtful scientific research. And you want to find a mentor who's caring and who's going to help you onto a career path. With a PhD, you can do research or teach in a university or develop policies that are based on research or do a wide variety of things, some of which we're going to talk about later. No doubt you are already starting to have questions. You can start typing in your questions now, and we will be answering all of your questions at the end of our webinar. Right now, I'm going to introduce you to a colleague of mine, Dr. William David Blessinger, who's on the line here, and he's going to tell us some more information about where biomedical scientists are trained and what graduate programs look like. Dave?
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. So there are lots of different places where you can get training in as a biomedical scientist, including many university programs that are associated with graduate schools in the arts and sciences. But the vast majority of training locations are located with the 130 or so medical schools in the United States where significant biomedical research is being conducted. There are a few other places, such as the NIH, which partners with graduate schools to provide training opportunities at the NIH intramural programs, and a few others as well. So how can I get ready for graduate school? A key trait that PhD training programs are seeking in trainees is the aptitude, desire, and ability to conduct research. However, before we will turn over our research laboratories, we usually want to make sure you have the basic communication skills and basic science knowledge, so the ability to do well in coursework is also important. The number one predictor that someone will have a successful career in research is an early and sustained interest and participation conducting research. Not all is lost if you do not have this credential. Say you just have a good to outstanding grades, GREs, and letters of recommendation, etc., you still might have a good chance of getting into a great graduate program. After all, learning how to do research is why you want to go to graduate school, right? But a solid grounding in research experience, more than anything else, will help you for and get into graduate school. What is significant research experience? Well, first off, it's important to gain knowledge about what you're getting into. And you can do this in a variety of ways. We'll be talking more about some of these opportunities, but multiple summer research projects are a good way to get exposure to research. And participating in activities within your school, such as senior thesis or honors research projects. And after a couple of years of pursuing research activities, you can also consider doing research after you finish your undergraduate degree in order to prepare yourself for graduate school. One of the things that's important is to become familiar with the idea of testing a hypothesis, becoming familiar with what the concept of what a hypothesis is and how to formulate one and how to go about testing it. It's important for you to understand the implications of your research projects, not just what the techniques are that you use in your projects, but what the impact of these projects might actually be. And this will help you in explaining the importance of your research to others. It's important for you to be able to describe your research experience and your contribution to a research project. And for example, you may find yourself in an interview situation where you're applying to graduate school, where this will be a subject that the interviewers are most likely to ask you questions about. So anticipate the question and start thinking about what your answers will be. So what should you expect in a PhD program? Well, first of all, during your first year or two, you're likely to be taking quite a bit of coursework and building a broad basis of knowledge that will help you understand science and communicate with others. You're likely to spend your time outside of the classroom doing rotation. In the rotation, you're sort of acting as a visiting scientist in someone's laboratory. You'll be learning about that laboratory's research interests and acquiring new laboratory skills and techniques. In addition, you'll be making contacts and networking with students, postdoc, and faculty. Ultimately, these rotations will lead to your choosing your mentor or your advisor and your research project. Most graduate programs require you to pass a milestone before allowing you to begin your actual dissertation research. The qualifying exam, sometimes called the candidacy exam, will be what you're looking at. These can take a variety of forms in different programs, ranging from a comprehensive exam of all of your coursework to a more focused exams on your particular proposed dissertation research. Once you pass this milestone, you're officially a candidate and officially ready to embark on your dissertation research. Now, once you pass your qualifying exams and become a candidacy, you begin your dissertation research in earnest, and you'll probably spend the next couple of years working on this. And ultimately, you'll write your dissertation or thesis and defend it to your research advisors and really to the campus as a whole. Along the way, you'll have many opportunities to write about your research for publication and to present your research in local, regional, national, or perhaps, if you're lucky, even international scientific meetings. And you'll also have opportunities to learn about a wide variety of career opportunities available to PhD scientists and the opportunities to develop professionally. You'll probably be formulating an individual development plan in which you'll set your goals and keep track of your achievements. You'll be learning about teaching or perhaps filing patents and learning about entrepreneurship and really a lot more. Eventually, you'll fulfill your PhD requirements and be ready to go out into the world of science on your own. How does the PhD prepare me for the real world? So earning a PhD, you'll learn how to ask important questions and how to find answers. It's likely you'll encounter some difficulties along the way. No one cuts new pathways without running into some roadblocks, but you'll learn how to overcome obstacles. You'll learn to chart your way through uncertainty. Uncertainty moves from being an obstacle to becoming an opportunity. And by learning to think like a scientist, you'll be at the forefront of creating new information. Through collaboration, you'll learn how to prevail and to become more competitive. You will be qualified for many career opportunities, careers in scientific industries, academic science, teaching, editing, leadership. There are endless opportunities when you have the ability to acquire new knowledge and to use that knowledge. I'd now like to turn the program over to Dr. Audra Van Wart at the Virginia Tech Carilion Research Institute in Roanoke, Virginia.
All right, thank you. So you've learned a little bit about the PhD, and you now know that the PhD will allow you to become a scientific expert, but you'll also become a leader, a communicator, and a critical thinker, and students are often surprised at the diversity of career opportunities that this prepares you for. So what can you be with a PhD? Well, here are just a few of the categories that describe what you can do with your PhD. So of course, medical and basic science research is a key area where PhD level scientists pursue. And this is where you engage on positions to advance our scientific and medical knowledge through research, from studying tiny molecules all the way up through patient populations and even health systems. You can also be involved in drug design and discovery. So this is a focus on identifying therapeutics and medical devices that can help treat, diagnose, or prevent disease. Many PhDs also are involved with education. So this is training the next generation of scientists from K through 12 all the way up through the university level. PhDs are frequently involved in consulting, so they provide advice to others based on their expertise. And this could include consulting within the judicial system, for companies, and even the healthcare sector. PhDs are also employed in law, so scientific expertise is needed to help scientists, universities, and companies in protecting their intellectual property once they've made certain scientific discoveries. And these PhDs can be employed in law firms, but also tech transfer offices at universities and in companies, as well as for the government at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Many PhDs are also involved in business and in finance, so the business of science, and providing advice regarding investments in biotechnology, devices, and drug development. Another very important area for PhDs to pursue is science policy. So this is an area of public policy that affects how we conduct science, such as funding and commercialization of research, but also consideration for how science and technology can best serve the public. And then finally, science writing is another major category of jobs that PhDs will pursue. So you can apply your degree and your writing skills to be involved in technical writing, so writing grants, writing textbooks, and regulatory documents, to also writing for the general or scientific audiences. And this can include writing for academic journals, media outlets such as National Public Radio, or science blogs, which I'm sure you all enjoy reading. So where might you work someday? What kind of places employ scientists in these different categories? So if you're interested in carrying out research or administering research, here are a couple of places you might like to pursue. So number one would be academic institutions. So according to a recent National Institutes of Health report, academic institutions actually employ just under half of all U.S. trained biomedical PhDs. And even within this category, there are large institutions, there are smaller colleges, and there are medical schools. Another major employer is research institutes and government agencies, such as the National Institutes of Health, as well as many others, such as Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Much of the research that's carried out also takes place in biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies. These are another major employer. And don't forget, entrepreneurialism is a growing source of excitement for a young PhD. So you can go off and start your own company. So what are some other career pathways for biomedical scientists with a PhD? Well, beyond research, there are many other ways to apply the degree. For example, in academia, you can focus on teaching, and this can be done at many levels, as I had indicated previously. But there's also always a need for scientists who can both think critically about the science, but also communicate its importance to broader audiences in order to support the research enterprise. So I had mentioned science policy. Well, scientists can support research through science policy through work at both the state and the national levels. And this is done through both the government as well as numerous nonprofit scientific organizations that are promoting policies to help fund and advance scientific research. And again, you can also do this through communication, through news articles, and even communication designed to help inform researchers or doctors. Another area that I'd like to mention is scientific publishing. So many PhDs also go on to work as scientific editors for academic journals and magazines. So there are many paths to graduate school, and there are many ways you can get more information if you're not sure at this time whether the PhD is right for you. So of course, you can go right from your bachelor's degree onto a PhD program. A master's is not required for most PhD programs. However, there are also all of these other ways that you can get additional research training or post-bac training. So a good reason to go on and pursue some of these other experiences is to learn what it's like to be intellectually engaged in hypothesis-driven research and also to identify which area of research excites you most. So ways to do this might include pursuing a master's degree. There are also many good post-bac programs, such as the PrEP program and National Institutes of Health fellowships. And these programs will give you some research experience, but also help prepare you for the application process and for graduate school in general. You may also want to pursue full-time research as a research technician or a research assistant for 1 or 2 years. So the advantage here is you are working a full-time job with salary and benefits, and you also have the option to perhaps take 1 or 2 graduate level courses and see what it's like to take courses at that level. So before you apply, there are a number of things that you're going to want to do. So number one is you want to read the scientific literature. Get a feel for what scientific research is all about. What is it that is being discovered? How are those discoveries being communicated out to the scientific audiences? You also want to take any opportunity that you can to attend research conferences. So these are a great opportunity for both presenting any research that you've done, as well as seeing the scope, the large scope of research that's taking place all across the country. These are often also great opportunities for networking, which is another thing that you're going to want to do. Get out and talk to other undergraduates, other graduate students, and even postdoctoral scientists. You know, these are people at various stages of their training that can help provide you some insight into what it's going to be like pursuing that degree and beyond pursuit of the degree. You also want to make the most of mentor relationships. So your mentor is going to be extremely important in providing advice to you that will help shape your training and help you decide if the PhD is right for you. The mentor is also someone who is probably going to be someone who's writing you a letter of recommendation when you apply for graduate school. So having a good relationship with your mentor and having someone who can attest to how hard you work in the lab and your scientific aptitude and your potential for succeeding in graduate school, that's going to be very important for you. And then finally, you want to make sure you understand the PhD application process. So attending this webinar is actually a very good start to this. And if you'd like to learn more, we have a subsequent webinar planned where we'll also get into more detail about the PhD application process. So I'm sure you're all aching for more information. Here are a few places where we think you should really turn to for information. So of course, the AAMC website and NIH.gov/training are great resources for you, especially if you're just in an exploratory phase right now and you just want the opportunity to find many types of information. But people are also a wonderful source of information. So you can turn to directors of summer programs and post-bac programs, and particularly your mentors if you participate in any of these programs or undergraduate research. You'll want to talk to professors and lab heads. They can also provide you good insight into what it's like, and every professor is going to give you a different piece of advice, so talk to as many people as you can. Your career advising office, of course, is going to be useful, especially when you're trying to determine maybe what school is right for you and what program type is right for you. Graduate students and postdocs, of course, they're going to give you honest firsthand information about their experiences. And then finally, don't be afraid to contact graduate schools of interest and the PhD program directors. So they're really going to be able to help you distinguish between different programs you might be interested in that have similar names but are actually very different in terms of content and culture. So these are just a few of the resources you can turn to. So keep in mind, from great minds come great discoveries, and that's what the PhD is all about. So at this point, I'd like to turn the webinar over to questions.
Hi, this is Victoria Friedman again, and we're going to now turn on our cameras so that you can see us and know that there are real people answering your questions. We've received a number of really great questions from you, and we're just going to start going down the line. Please continue to type in your questions, and we'll answer as many as possible. So the first question that I see here, and that's really the most general, is whether people can obtain these slides. So I'm happy to tell you that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available to you through the NRMN website and also through the AAMC website that you see listed here. So first, we have a question here about the longest amount of time required for a PhD, or the approximate amount of time required. So I will turn this question over to my colleagues for their answers.
Well, so this can be quite variable. I've seen people get through a PhD program in as short as 3 years. Very unusual, though. 4 years, not so unusual. 5 years is about average. 6 years, not so unusual. 7, you're getting kind of far out there. You probably ought to finish up and get out of there.
That's great. Okay, so we have another question about rotations. Dr. Van Wart, can you tell us a little about what these rotations are and how they take place?
Sure. Oftentimes in biomedical graduate degree programs, students will engage in one or more research rotations throughout their first year, and these can vary in length. Sometimes they're 6 weeks, sometimes they're 8 weeks, but these are often meant to be opportunities to experience different research environments, to sample different research techniques perhaps, and to figure out basically which lab is going to be the best fit, which lab or research group, I should say, will be the best fit for them, so that at the end of that first year, they can determine who they're going to carry out their dissertation research with.
That's great. So we have a number of questions about undergraduate majors, ranging from biology, chemistry, physics, medical technology. Are any of these better for a PhD, or will all of them work? Dr. Wessington?
Well, I can try to answer that question. I'm going to ask for help from my other panelists. Pretty much any degree can lead you into biomedical sciences, but the most often ones that you see are biological sciences or chemical sciences, chemistry, biochemistry, biology, things of that nature. If you were going to be coming in a little bit from the side doors, it might be important for you to have some experience with some of these courses, or perhaps some laboratory experience that would get you trained up in some of the more biological and chemical type of or medical type of areas. But we used to list certain degrees that we were looking for on our graduate program list, and now we say, anybody can try to get in our program. We'll evaluate your background and determine whether or not we think you'll be successful in our program.
That's great. Dr. Van Wart?
Yeah, I concur with that assessment. I think oftentimes when students come with these diverse backgrounds, it helps add strength to our graduate programs. At the same time, we do want to make sure that you're prepared for the particular coursework that you'll be experiencing in our graduate program. And I think oftentimes what will be a strong background is one that gives you particular competencies. So we are often in our biomedical related graduate programs looking for something similar to a pre-med type background, where you're pursuing those competencies in the biological sciences, some quantitative sciences, but you don't necessarily have to be a biology major.
I think that's a very good point, and I see that we have some questions from engineering students and computer science students. And all of those sciences are relevant to the biomedical sciences. You will need to explore PhD programs carefully and see where you will best fit, but you can certainly enter a program. In addition, we have some questions about organic chemistry and biochemistry. And as you know, these are really foundation sciences for biomedical research. But programs vary in different requirements, and this is one thing that you will need to explore with each individual program. So another series of questions that we have is about students who feel that their undergraduate grades are lower than they had hoped and don't really represent what they can do. So I'm wondering if, Dr. Wessinger, you can offer some suggestions for these students?
Well, so of course, in the process of evaluating applications, we've got however many applications we have, you're in competition with students who probably have very good grades. And so having C-level grades in your undergraduate work is going to put you at a disadvantage. Now, there are ways to overcome these disadvantages. One way would be to, for example, prove to the people who are evaluating your application that you can, in fact, do graduate level work. So you might consider just enrolling in some graduate courses. Often you can enroll in a course without even being accepted into a program. So if you enrolled in a course that was a core curriculum course in a graduate program and you aced the course, that would pretty much provide evidence that you are capable of doing the level of work that you need to do in order to succeed in graduate school.
I think that's a great answer. Always remember that no door is ever closed and that there are many paths to the PhD. I would strongly recommend considering a post-bac program such as PrEP. This is an NIH-funded post-baccalaureate research education program. You can find information about this on the NIH website. And there are more than 25 PrEP programs throughout the United States that will give you 1 to 2 years of intensive research work coupled with coursework and really prepare you for a competitive PhD program. So that's another very good pathway. Okay, so we have a number of questions also about the PhD application process. I want to remind everyone that we'll be doing another webinar. I think it will be scheduled shortly. It will probably be at the end of March or beginning of April. And this webinar will go into all the intimate details of the PhD application process. But for now, we'll answer some of the more general application questions. So the first thing that people are concerned about is the undergraduate research experiences. Is it better to have multiple small experiences or one large experience? Dr. Van Wart?
That's a good question, and that's one that I hear a lot. I think you want to try to have an enriching experience. And if you don't get that, the first place you decide to work, then I think you want to move on and try another experience. I mean, this is really going to depend on the individual. You have to figure out what's right for you. If I wouldn't encourage you to stay continuing to do research in an environment where you weren't enjoying yourself just because you feel like you need to be there a certain amount of time. At the same time, just because you have four or five different research experiences does not make you a stronger candidate, because you're probably going to have less to show for those experiences. So what we like to see is some balance there. So it's important that you were able to really learn to think critically. If you were able to get your research to a point where you were able to present it in abstract form, that's also a plus. So that's what you should be working towards, figuring out if that type of research is something you want to be engaged in and showing some progress on that project.
I think that's a very important advice. But what if you've never done a research project? How do you go about finding one and making yourself a good candidate for a research project? Dr. Wessinger?
Oh, I knew you were going to pitch that one to me. So let's see. There are multiple ways, but really, before going to graduate school, you need to make sure that this is the right path for you. It's a fairly lengthy path. Um, there are a lot of advantages to taking the path compared to other career pathways, but the best way to find out if this is the right path for you is to put the shoes on and wear them and see if they fit right. So I think that that's pretty essential for you to try out some research. Now, how do you do that? Well, as we mentioned, the prep programs I think often have a research experience component to them. You can just go down to a laboratory at your local medical school and try to talk your way in to get hired to do some work and work through the system working on research projects. That's actually not a bad way to get involved in research and to get recommendations from people who are trusted within that particular graduate program. So you work for a couple of years for Dr. X. He's got a burgeoning research project at this university, and Dr. X puts you forward and says, this guy is the guy for graduate school, and he's done such an excellent job doing research with me, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one sort of backdoor into research for people who haven't got the experience. But pretty much I think you're going to need a little bit of research experience to be very competitive in this area.
If I could just add one thing, it's just to be persistent. So oftentimes students will get shy and they'll pick one or two, they'll contact one or two people who they feel really strongly about working for, and you may not get responses back when you contact faculty. So just don't be afraid to go out and knock on doors until you find an opportunity that works for you.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. And some people have asked questions about research technician jobs, and these are really a wonderful way to have scientific experience, to work full-time in a research lab, and also to get paid for doing it. Not only that, you will meet other people who are doing research, you will find out about graduate programs, and it's really a way of broadening your horizons. So a research technician job after undergraduate training is a great way to find out more about research. The other thing I wanted to mention, we have a number of questions about how to pay for graduate school. So one important thing that we haven't really discussed here is that all of the PhD programs that we are talking about are actually free. Not only are they free because the institutions provide full tuition remission, but in addition, as a PhD student, you will get a stipend. And this stipend is a salary that will enable you to pay your rent, buy your food, and actually enjoy life. So one of the great hidden secrets about the biomedical PhD is that you get paid for doing this. In some schools, you will need to be a teaching assistant as part of that agreement. And that's a wonderful experience as well. In addition, these biomedical PhD programs are open to both U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens. So everyone is encouraged to apply. The differences may be in how your particular stipend is funded. And some of these differences operate behind the scenes. Some of these differences are specific to specific programs. So you will get more information as you start to look for PhD programs. And one important thing that you can do, you'll see on your screen, there's a website, aamc.org/PhD. This is a very good place to get much more specific information about the PhD, also to get a list of PhD programs within medical schools. So you can start your exploration process here. And finally, some people have asked, how do they go about applying? And again, we'll be talking about this. but just as an overview, the application process usually begins in September. Most of the deadlines are in December or early January. Then every PhD program does interviews, and after the interviews, you will learn whether or not you've been accepted to the program. So that's just a quick overview. We have a number of questions now about careers in the biomedical sciences. So let's talk a little bit more about the careers. People are asking, what are the job opportunities? When you have a PhD, can you get a good paying job, and can you be considered for a wide variety of jobs? Dr. Van Wart?
Yep. Well, I spoke for 10 minutes on that topic. There are clearly many different areas that PhDs can pursue, and it's going to partially depend on what area of science you pursue your PhD, and in terms of how well you're going to get paid. I mean, that's what everybody wants to know. Some of those jobs are certainly going to pay more than others. I wouldn't necessarily let that dictate what area you're going to pursue, because people that are extremely good at what they do are often going to find success in that respect. But certainly there are a number of different types of jobs that I had outlined in the last portion of this talk.
And again, the webinar slides will be available, so everyone can look at that again. So some people have asked about PhD programs specifically. How much coursework is involved in the typical PhD program? Dr. Wessinger?
So I think this can vary quite a bit among programs. So at my university, we have 5 or 6 basic science PhD programs. Some of them are fairly intensive with coursework, and some of them are pretty quick to get the coursework behind the students so they can get into the laboratory. At our institution, it varies from about 3 semesters of coursework to 2 years or 2.5 years of coursework. So it just kind of depends on, what the thinking of the faculty is with regard to how much coursework the students need. I think the trends are to less coursework and more lab work, but I can't speak to that point exactly. But our students are done with the majority of their coursework in 3 semesters. I do always encourage students to remember that they're in graduate school, and this is the time to take courses. When you get out of graduate school, it's very difficult to go back and say, gosh, I wish I'd taken cancer biology or some other courses. It's very difficult to go back and take those courses. So it's important to take whatever courses can help you with your dissertation research, and take them at the appropriate time.
Okay.
I can add to that as well. And this also relates to the last question. I think when you're looking at graduate schools, you want to also make sure that you're looking at programs that are supportive of you taking additional classes, if that's what it is that you need to do, or pursuing internships or professional development training, if that's something that you think is important to you. So, so make sure that this is something that you're asking students and faculty about at the various places where you're considering applying to PhD programs.
So we have some questions about undergraduate majors again, and people seem to be concerned about whether they need specific preparation in particular areas. One student is writing that all of the courses that he or she has taken are wonderful, and that she or he doesn't really know which way to go. So can we offer some advice to someone who loves science? Dave?
So there are a lot of schools have what are known as interdisciplinary biomedical sciences type programs. And these are programs that are quite useful for students who perhaps don't have a particular drive for a particular field. They're just interested in everything. and they need to figure out where their real interests lie. And usually these programs allow students to kind of shop around for a couple of semesters before they identify a research lab or a particular type of area that they're going to go into research for. So that would be the type of program you're going to look for. And in my case, I'm a director of an interdisciplinary graduate program, and a lot of students come to our program because they're in that exact same situation. They're not quite sure what they want to do. They're not quite ready to commit to 4 or 5 years of research in a particular area, and they really appreciate having the time to sort of sort things out, see what shoes fit for that hike. So
I think that's a great answer. The other thing to consider are the rotations, which allow you to really taste the science in different areas and see which of these scientific areas particularly appeals to you.
Yep.
And I think that's the reason why a single summer research project is often not sufficient for entering graduate school, because you really should have a little bit more of a background and a perspective on scientific research before applying. Okay, so we're returning to some questions about careers. We have a number of questions from students who really say that they love being at the bench, but they think they're asking if the only career pathway for a PhD who loves to do research, does that absolutely require writing grants, being the head of the lab, or can you be a PhD doing research in other ways? And more?
Yeah, you don't have to be the PI of the lab, the principal investigator, in order to carry out research. Different types of institutions have different types of organizational structures that will allow for some people to hold higher titles where they're not actually the primary person responsible for the lab, but they're still running independent projects within that lab and have trainees that are working underneath them. So there are lots of opportunities. It's also possible to not have to write grants. However, no matter what job you pursue, if you're doing research, there's going to be some way that you're going to be held accountable for making sure that the resources you're using are being used wisely, that you're making progress in your research, and you will of course need to acquire new resources, and so that's going to require some demonstration that you're performing sound experiments, getting good preliminary data, and that's a smart path forward. And so that's in academia, that's in industry, at institutes, and in the government as well.
So we have a few questions about how admissions committees look at PhD applicants. What qualities are most valued in good PhD applicants? Dr. Wessinger?
Well, as I mentioned in my portion of the talk, one of the main things we're looking for is someone who is going to be comfortable in the research arena. And the best way to demonstrate that you're comfortable in the research arena is to become involved in it, and the best way to become involved in it is become involved early and in a sustained way. That's really the best overall credentials that we're looking for. Of course, we're looking for other things as well. We're looking to make sure that students have the appropriate academic background to be successful in the coursework. I think one of the questions on here was, do we want students to have a publication before they come to graduate school? And that's very unusual for students to have publications prior to graduate school, but students that have publications prior to graduate school, that's an extra bonus for them on their application. So I certainly wouldn't discount the value of having publications, but you will be a different candidate from the majority of them if you do. I'm not sure if
with regard to the publications, someone is asking, when are you considered a full-fledged PhD? Is this after you complete your thesis or after you have several publications under your belt? And that's a great question because the publications are, of course, completely linked to your progress in the laboratory. And many graduate programs actually have publication requirements, as does our graduate program here at Einstein. But you are considered a PhD when you complete all the requirements for the doctoral degree. And that includes your coursework, your research, writing your dissertation and defending it, and if there's a publication requirement, a publication as well. And when you have completed all these requirements, we get to call you doctor. So someone has also asked, what is the hardest part of PhD or graduate training? And I'm sure we all have some answers, and let's start with Dr. Van Wart.
Oh, you threw that one to me. The hardest part. I would say the hardest part first starting out is just accepting, you do very well when you're an undergraduate, and your mind is open to a whole new world of uncertainty, and you're starting to understand how much it is that you don't know, and you have to start from that point and know that you're going to become an expert in one area. So I think it's that. It's just maintaining that drive to pursue that dream of becoming a scientist, despite all of the hurdles that you see. And it actually becomes a very fun journey. Even the failures, there will be failures, and you'll learn to deal with failures very well. Overcoming all of those obstacles along the way and feeling yourself overcoming those challenges is going to be extremely rewarding. So I always advise my trainees, don't get down on yourself. I feel like all the best students at some point stop and think, maybe I shouldn't be a scientist, maybe I can't make it through, and then they're so proud when they do.
So persistence.
Persistence.
So for students that are entering into graduate school, they often have difficulty adjusting to the teaching methods that are used in graduate school. In undergraduate, they often tell you what they want you to know. They'll give you some lists. They'll give you some objectives that will, you can, if you study and know this stuff, then you'll get an A on the test. And in graduate school, a lot of times they want you to learn a lot of information and then use that information. And so students have a little bit of adjustment period when they're first starting graduate school. They will get comments like, well, he talked about this, that, and the other thing, and then he never even asked us anything about that. Well, what he asked you about was he wanted you to use, or she wanted you to use that information that you were given. And so it's a different mindset for studying and preparing for exams, and that often is very frustrating for students when they first start with graduate school. Myself, I was out of school for a couple of years before I went back to graduate school, and I had to totally relearn how to study. It's amazing how quickly you forget those study skills that are so necessary in order to be able to cut through the information and find just what is important to learn. So that's sometimes frustrating for students in their first semester, but they usually get over it pretty quick.
Yeah. So to my mind, the hardest thing about a PhD is that the degree is granted, you write your thesis when you've discovered something new. And no one can predict how long it will take for you to actually make that discovery. And so sometimes it's hard to realize that you just have to keep on going. But it's also part of the fun, because when you solve that puzzle, when you get an answer to the question, there's no other feeling like that eureka feeling. I found it. This is it. And that's really what the PhD is all about. So at this point, I think we're going to wrap up. We have really enjoyed speaking with all of you. I know that there are a number of questions that we couldn't answer right now, and we will try to answer these by either emails or in our subsequent webinars. I hope you've all enjoyed learning about PhD programs and about where the PhD can lead you. And we'll look forward to your participation in our next webinar, which is going to be about the PhD application process. Thank you all.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you.